Thought that this might get you out of a homily for this week, but this is my one chance to talk, so I'm actually going to really take advantage for this one. First, I do want to say I had to look at my text messages for 1 second to get some things straight. And a lot of people sent me messages, wishing me a happy Father's Day, and I can't respond back until after retreat, but I want to say thank you very much for all those messages, and it's also a time to give a little bit of a guilt trip for all those who did not send me messages this morning too. But today we celebrate the mystery of the Holy Trinity, the revelation of God as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And this is one of the deepest and most profound mysteries of revelation that we have as Christians. And those who come, especially from atheistic backgrounds, it's easier if we've grown up just thinking about God as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But those who come into the faith without any knowledge of God, it's a very difficult thing for them to understand. How can God be one and three separate persons at the same time? But this is why we call it fides quadens intellectum. This is what a term that the fathers of the church used to describe our faith. Fides quadens intellectum. Faith seeking understanding. I believe the revelation of God. Therefore, I'm going to seek to understand what He revealed to us. Because by our own intellect, we can work to an understanding that there must be a God. We can use philosophy and science to come to a degree of certainty that there must be a creator, one who brought something out of nothing, who created an ordered universe. But we cannot reason our way to who God is. The person of God, the character of God. That has to be revealed to us. And the essence of our faith as Catholics is we believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God who came to us to reveal to us who God is. So whatever Jesus Christ said and did, we look at Him and we listen to Him to understand who is God. And Jesus all the time spoke about Himself as the Son of God, the Son of the Father, equal to the Father, but the great fathers before Him, greater than Him in His divinity. And that He would send the Holy Spirit, that the Father and the Son would send the Spirit who would also pass on to us what He received from them. So the whole mystery of the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, is us believing in Jesus and then taking His word and trying to understand it. One of my favorite sayings about the Trinity is that God reveals Himself to us as He saves us. And if you look at all of the scriptures are a progressive revelation of who God is as He's seeking to save His people. In the Old Testament, God spoke as a voice as He passed on the covenant from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and all the patriarchs. But then He came even closer, and He revealed Himself as the Word made flesh in Jesus Christ when He came to fulfill those ancient prophecies of the Messiah. So again, He reveals Himself more as He draws closer to save us. And then the culmination of that celebrated last week was the sending forth of the Holy Spirit, that God would dwell within us. So in all of salvation history, you see God revealing Himself more and more as He comes into the life of history to save mankind. And as He's doing it, He's drawing closer and closer to us. But there's a deep truth that goes along with this. We do not understand the Trinity by professing the Trinity. We understand the Trinity by experiencing the Trinity's work of salvation in our own lives. And the saints, this is something that they're persistent is, that we have different experiences of the persons of the Trinity at different times in our life. When we're saved in different ways. For me, it was Jesus was always the first one. And I didn't even understand who the Father was until almost 10 years into my formation, when I really experienced the Father. And it wasn't until I was ordained a priest and in my priesthood that I really started to pray and experience the Holy Spirit. but think about it for yourselves. In God's own work of saving you, how has he revealed himself to you along the way? I wouldn't call this a highlight of my retreat so far, but it was something that this reminded me of. I started my retreat for 3 days at Marymount Hermitage, right, just to begin there and slowly move. And on Friday, it was the feast of St. Francis of Padua, St. Anthony of Padua, who's my patron saint, and had a big work in, kind of drawing me back to the church. And so I go into the chapel at Marymount on this Friday, and I'm setting up for Mass, and it's in the middle of the desert there. So there's bugs and insects, everything everywhere in the chapels and in the hermitage, all that. But I walk in and I turn on the light, and I see a little note from Sister Mary Beverly that says, "Beware of the mouse traps. A mouse got into the sacristy." And I look down, and there's all these black little cardboard pieces with all this glue on top of it, like right in front of me. And right in front of my foot was a mouse, just trapped right there, sitting with his hands and his feet in that glue. And it looked so small and cute and helpless. It reminded me of Isaiah. I was just looking down right at it, just like that look right now. And I couldn't just leave it there to die, right? So I felt bad, and I was like, well, maybe I can save this thing. So I picked it up, and I took it outside the chapel. I was like, all right, little buddy, this is going to hurt, but this is for your good. And so I grabbed it on the back of its neck to try to help it, to pull it off. And right when I grabbed the back of its neck, it bit me, which also reminded me of Isaiah. And so I started pulling at it, and I kind of lost my cool for a second there. Right when it bit me, I was, ah! And I threw it. And it goes up in the air, and it falls on the ground. And now, not only are its hands and feet still stuck on the glue, but its back of its head is also there. And I'm like, yeah, you feel pretty stupid now, don't you? Walked over to it and was thinking about what I should do, because I was like, this is going to be really hard to get this thing off. So I picked it up again. And I'm like, and it was just looking at me. I think it knew it made a mistake, because it had nothing left to do at that point. So I was like, all right, just stay with me here. And I started to peel its head off of the glue, and I gave it a little bit of a buzz cut at that moment. And it was just, I don't know if it was totally resigned to the moment or in total shock or just ready for whatever, because it just was, we just had a moment. It was just looking at me, this little mouse, and I was looking at him, and I start pulling him off of the glue. And I got most of him off of that glue, but he definitely lost some skin in the game. And it was one of the most painful things you could tell. And right when I finally got it detached, I put it on the ground, and it didn't move. It was alive, it was breathing, but you could tell it wasn't making any fast movements. And I needed to get back into celebrate Mass at this moment, so I was like, well, it's St. Anthony of Padua's feast day, and he's famous for preaching to the fishes. So I was like, well, maybe I can give him a special blessing. So I was like, Lord, through the intercession of St. Anthony, the Immaculate Heart of Mary, may you give this mouse new life. May you resurrect it, fill it with hope and fire, the spirit of David Goggins, that it might move past this present moment. Funny, I actually said that too. I feel like Jesus must have been buying I was going to do the miracle. Then you have to bring up David Goggins. No, not anymore. But I prayed over it, gave it a blessing, and then I went back into the chapel, and it was laying out there. I didn't know what was going to happen with it. But I was celebrating the Mass, and all I could see in that entire Mass, I was thinking about the mouse, but I was just thinking that was my life. There's no way I could have ever been saved from the life that I was living before Jesus Christ came into it. I was so stuck to this world through concupiscence, through sin, through my understanding of who I was, what my life was supposed to be, and who God was. And there was nothing that could detach me from that. I was hands and feet glued to this world and to so many false understandings of it. And the only reason I am who I am now as a priest for him is because the Holy Trinity was at work breaking me apart from this world, which was the most painful experiences I've ever had in my life. And many people who've experienced Jesus Christ and the Father working in their life know how painful it is to be detached from the sins of this world. But I was so filled with just a gratitude and thanksgiving for the work of the Trinity to get me where I was. And when I walked outside of the church again, I was I was pleased to see that it wasn't there. Either maybe it got eaten by a snake, or maybe it was given a second chance. And it reminded me of this experiment that was done in the 1950s in Hopkins University. Dr. Paul Richard, he's a behavioral psychologist, and I don't know if you guys have heard of this. He took rats and he put them in water, these water basins, to see how long they could stay afloat before they drowned. He did not have a sensitive heart like I did, right? Obviously. So he would just watch them until they gave up. You know how long the average rat lasted in the water? 15 minutes. 15 minutes, one after another, would drown. At one point, he waited till the rat was about to drown, about 14 and a half minutes. And he reached down and he picked up the rat. And he took it out of the water, he put it on dry ground, he gave it some water and food and dried it off. And then about 5 minutes later, he put it back into the water. Sadistic, right? You know how long it lasted this time? 60 hours. The average rat would last up to 60 hours swimming in that water. That's a 3,600% increase from what it was before. Why? Because it experienced being saved. And that experience of being saved by another actually filled it with enough hope and determination to push through and to keep swimming. That's why I say it's so important that it's not just the Blessed Trinity is somewhere out there I believe in, but if I have not experienced the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit coming into my reality in one way or another and saving me from my sin and reorienting my life, then it's not going to affect the way I live. And that's the whole purpose of God becoming man and entering into our world, to affect the way we live our lives. God reveals himself as he comes to save us. And as he comes to save us, he draws closer to us in that revelation. So I invite you to really think about in this Mass, how have you experienced, just between you and God, his saving hand coming into your life to redirect you towards heaven? And how is that transformed your relationship with him? And we as Catholics, more than anybody else, should have that understanding of God's revelation every time we come to Mass, where he comes to draw closer to us than in any other place in history, taking the form of bread and wine and giving us his very self in the Holy Eucharist, to come into our hearts, to fill us with himself, and to save us from this world. God reveals himself in order to save us. And to the degree that we experience his salvation, then we will be transformed in the way that we live our life.